the 13th of February 2023, the small, vibrant coastal community of Muriwai Beach, northwest of Auckland, New Zealand, was ripped apart by Cyclone Gabrielle. This podcast captures what happened on the night and in the days, months and years that followed. Join me, Mandy Jakic, as I speak to fellow Muriwai locals, volunteers and those involved in the emergency and recovery effort. Hear about their experiences of loss and upheaval, the impact on their lives, and the community-led initiatives that helped Muriwai find a way forward. Welcome to Precipice. In this episode, I speak to Michael Ward, known by most as Nate. Nate is married to Kate Ward, who I also speak to on the podcast, and was the chairman of the surf club at Muriwai at the time of Cyclone Gabrielle. He is now the Finance Administration Convenor and is still a trustee of the facility that owns and manages the surf club building.
I really felt like we had failed in the community because, we had this fantastic facility that in all respects should have been a place they could go to and feel safe. In the middle of the night, it should have been this little shining beacon of hope, and actually pretty quickly the power went out and there was no backup comms, no nothing, and it really just sounds like it was a hellhole.
Nate talks about the issues on the night and in the days following at the surf club, which became the evacuation point for the Muriwai community on the night of Cyclone Gabrielle, and a pivotal gathering point for the community.
We weren't unfunded to be we're not funded to be a community centre, let alone a refuge. And when we'd looked into it before, apparently we were too close to sea level to be a civil defence refuge because of tsunami risk. We weren't high enough above sea level. So there was no sort of formal funding.
He talks about the learnings and actions that have been taken to prepare the facility better for possible weather events, including plans for water, infrastructure, systems, resources, funding, power and communication. Nate shares advice he has for other communities dealing with a weather event like this and running a community facility that has become an evacuation point as well as an integral part of a community's response to a disaster and subsequent recovery.
So my name's Michael Ward. I live at Waimoku, which is about 15 minutes drive from Muriwai. At the time of Cyclone Gabrielle, I was the chairman of the surf club, and I still have a position at the surf club. I'm now the Finance Administration Convenor. I'm also still am a trustee of the facility that owns and manages the surf club building. So where do I start? On the night, I wasn't actually at Muriwai on the night, but I can kind of remember the night because the phone started ringing at some point. I think I was actually in bed and half asleep, and people were ringing and saying, "Oh, it's flooding out here, and how do we get through the park gate? And, where's the key to the surf club and all this sort of thing?" And I'm looking out the bedroom window at the trees blowing around a bit of rain, and thinking, "Come on, guys, this is just just a bit of a wet, windy night. You can wet this out for yourself." And I guess sometime through the night it became apparent, well, it might have been a bit more than that. Next morning, we wake up, and within an hour or so, we had 3 refugee families in our house, 4 extra dogs, and another, so 2 families and little kids, another woman with a cat, I think, had all been evacuated from Muriwai. By then, sort of learned that possibly a couple of firemen were missing, and there had been landslides, and it's like, okay, well, the surf club itself flooded, and so that started to dawn on me. Well, this was quite serious. We had no power at that stage, so we've got a generator that up by our place going, made cups of tea, and then Charlie, my son, and myself went out to Muriwai and met Luke Navoro, who's our maintenance electrician, and started to walk around the club, and it's quite depressing. It was dark. The place, well, certainly parts of the club still had standing. It was a mess, and kind of practical project manager me kicked in, and it's like, okay, what do we need? We need some power, so dispatch Luke to go and get a generator. which he did. Johnny O'Leary, who's our maintenance plumber, showed up, and we went round with 13 toilets in the facility that were all filled to the seat with paper because the power had gone off fairly early in the piece, and so no power, no water, no wastewater. So we cleared those pretty quickly. Generator came back. Luke and Charlie wired it in. We got the power up. We still had fibre. Vodafone, as it was then, wasn't working, but Spark was. And then I can't remember exactly how it went, but people kind of started to show up, and with wetbacks, squeegees, brooms, and we got into it. And by the end of that day, we had the place cleaned up. It's probably cleaner than it's been for years because everything got a good wash with water, and it was pulled away from the walls and that. So, overarching memory of that day was how quickly people showed up, and we just kept going until quite late in the evening. And it was, I would say, good as new, but someone had the foresight to build all the internal walls up on the concrete kickers so that there was no damage to walls, and it was a concrete floor pretty much throughout. So that worked really well.
Had you kind of worked out that the surf club was going to be a place of evacuation?
Well, kind of yes and no. There's no other place. Well, there's the fire brigade, fire station, and golf course, but kind of yes and no. We aren't funded to be we're not even funded to be a community centre, let alone a refuge. And when we'd looked into it before, apparently we were too close to sea level to be a civil defence refuge because of tsunami risk. We weren't high enough above sea level. So there was no sort of formal funding. I really felt like we had failed in the community because, we had this fantastic facility that in all respects should have been a place they could go to and feel safe. In the middle of the night, it should have been a sort of shining beacon of hope, and actually pretty quickly the power went out and there was no backup comms, no nothing, and it really just sounds like it was a hellhole, and they had to get everyone out of there. And so I did feel like, we've got to do better than that in the future. And I don't recall anyone talking about, hey, there's this big weather system coming and we really need to think about what we're going to do and how we're going to organise ourselves. I just don't recall it being on anyone's radar, even though we've got all weather apps to tell us.
Had the council ever had any conversations with you as an organisation of okay, if this happens, this is going to be used?
Not that I know. No, I think quite a number of years before there'd been an attempt to sort of link up the various entities like the Fire Brigade and the Surf Club and others into some sort of a civil defence response. But when the sun's shining, no one wants. Everyone just feels a bit like Dad's Army, and no one wants to sit around and talk about what the terrible things that could go wrong. So no, nothing that I was aware of. And again, personally, I felt like, gee, you should have done better than this. Well, we were in an overland flow path, which I didn't realise. I'm an engineer, and I thought I should have known that. But all of that stormwater potentially could come through this club. And I came in and saying to myself, the day we were cleaning up, never again on my watch is this going to happen. And then about 4 days later, it happened again.
You've learned so much from that event. What things have been put in action to sort of make sure that doesn't happen again?
So pretty quickly we got onto infrastructure, and so we got a grant from the MPI for a generator. We upgraded the water treatment system so that in the event that we had to stand alone, we had really rock solid treatment of our water, so we could ensure we had water. We got Starlink installed so that if we did lose the fibre comms, we cut over the Starlink. We got a bunch of stuff for the SAR squad around, generators and power banks and cots and blankets and stuff that would mean that they could respond a bit better to things that might happen in the immediate area. The council addressed that whole overland flow path thing to formalise the diversion so that water couldn't come into the club. And we had some money on the comms system inside the club so that it was full of people. You could actually talk to everyone in the club at once, rather than having anyone to come downstairs or come out of the up in the eye hole. So did that stuff. And then what's been happening since then, which I wasn't 100% aware of, but through the Muriwai Community Association and some other loosely aligned groups, a bit of a plan was put together to communicate with the community, make sure everyone knew the neighbours, and came up with a way to efficiently communicate with people if someone like the step of the game. And that really hit its straps over this last weekend when we had Cyclone Gabrielle bearing down on us, and this time everyone took notice and realised this could be serious, and we did some proper planning and got the various groups together and sat down in the surf club and said, okay, what are we going to do this weekend? We'd done some stuff before that, but we were sort of ready for it this time. And comms got pushed out to the community saying, we're open for business, the lights will be on, feel unsafe, come now. Otherwise, if you decide you want to come in the middle of the night, here's how you get here, all that sort of stuff. So far better prepared. And also there was stuff coming down the pipe from Auckland Emergency Management. They were making contact and just assessing the meeting and that sort of thing. So a lot better, and as it panned out, we didn't need it, so it was everyone took it very seriously. But
yeah, it's great that sort of all of that has been actioned, as really as a result of the experience of Cyclone Gabrielle.
We were there very much. It was like, we're here, we're ready to help, we've got the infrastructure. Lifeguards stood down from all lifeguarding activities, but they're available if they need it. SAR squad had told Northern Region, we're not going out of the area, we're going to stay here and look after the immediate community, and they'd have to go a bit wider, maybe community places like that, depending on the flooding, but they'd already made that call. And Surf Life Saving New Zealand had sent some SAR resource from the South Island up into Northland, just in case, rather than trying to call on squads out of the Auckland area. So all that worked quite well, it seems. Yeah, it was a much slicker response. What I did learn from Gabrielle was that there is no kind of Auckland emergency management team of any scale who's able to address everything that's gone wrong in Auckland if it comes through. But you have to organise yourself in local communities to look after yourself. I've sort of got this number of at least 72 hours. How are you going to keep the lights on, comms going? And we've got a lot of resource right in the community. People with diggers and people with arborists and electricians and people from the film industry with generators. And that we've got a lot of resource to look after ourselves, and you have to sort of know what all that stuff is and have a way to tap into it. But safely, like you can't go on the limb and do crazy things in the middle of the night. But in the aftermath, you self-organise pretty quickly.
Yeah, and having a plan. Is there anything else that you could sort of recommend from your experience to other communities, other things that they could get kind of set up? I mean, I guess not every community has an identified evacuation building.
No, and we kind of do now, but we're I hate harp on about funding piece, but we're still not kind of recognised, financially for so Surf Club and the trust back up that particular part of the tab. It'd be great if from Civil Defence or Auckland Council or someone, there was just a little bit of help in that regard to keep it to top condition, because you've got a generator after year one, it's a brand new generator. 10 years on, who's been maintaining it so that it still kicks into life when you need it to get something.
Have you got any tips for communities as a financial person for obtaining grants and from further afield?
Only in that. I mean, we as the Surf Club, we had two registered charities who had quite a good vehicle to go after grants. So it existed, all that infrastructure and governance was there. So there is money out there as long as you've got a good vehicle to go after it. They want to see that you've got some governance and audited accounts and all that sort of that boilerplate stuff you need to apply. If you've got that, then who would have thought NPI would buy us a generator? We somehow tagged onto a kind of a rural resilience fund or something like that. But that's where we got our generator from. So you might not have an identified facility, but you may have some sort of entity community that you can use as that vehicle. Well,
And as far as council goes, Auckland Council, did you feel supported? And, were there any issues there that you'd like to share?
Look, I feel like me, in my role as, looking after the surf club, which was kind of the centre of what I was looking after, we didn't need a lot from them. But I know that the members of the community who got stickered and had all that uncertainty around their status. I don't think they enjoyed the ride. It looked like fun. So we Tiverton Surf Club cleaned it up pretty quickly, and then we were able to offer it as a not just as a refuge, but a place. We had all those facilities like a walk-in chiller and fridges, and rock-up storage, and all that stuff, which meant that as people started from outside the area started to offer us all sorts of things. We've got 50 litres of ice cream. Would you like it? And it's like, yes, and we've got a place to keep it cool. And so there's that piece. There's an immediate so there's that it happens. You deal with the emergency stuff on the day, and after a couple of days, you sort of got yourself straight, and then you go into that next phase, which is starting to support using the facilities you've got to start supporting the people who have really been hard hit. And that, I can't remember exactly how long, but that can go on for months while people are feeling uncertainty and probably quite traumatised. Need somebody to go and talk to other people who are traumatised, maybe a few people who aren't traumatised, to cheer them up.
You wonder if communities, who haven't actually been affected by an event like we were, if they are kind of coming together and making plans. Do you have any recommendations, anything else that you can add?
Well, just look around, look around at the environment here, and I guess we didn't used to refer to those hills behind us as cliffs, but when you look at them, they are, and when you look at the aerial photos, you can see, well, they've got the shape of things that have been formed by slips, and that just paints them in a different light. Some a bit more wise to where maybe you shouldn't live, and some really simple stuff like keeping an eye on the drains and not always expecting the council's going to show up and clean out those drains, and it can just be a few leaves in the wrong drain and a bit of water, and all of a sudden, like we had that slip on Overtower Road, and that was last year. That was easily avoided. It was just a little bit of water going in the wrong direction, and all of a sudden, a few people had mud up to the back doors. So so it's really I guess assessing the environmental risks that you're facing. If the water falls out of the sky in large quantities, where does it go, and what happens if where it goes at the moment is over the top with the go there. And also what else could happen. I think one of the things we were always worried about was a forest fire in forest and a strong noise blowing it down on us, and maybe setting fire to those trees behind the surf club and burning the whole place down. So that hasn't happened yet, but the next thing might not be a weather event.
Yeah, I guess it would be actually good to speak about the fire thing, and that, what other place could be used as an evacuation resource. What do you think Muriwai did really well?
So I was really impressed with the way that the various groups sprang up after that. The people that stepped up into leadership roles and just stuck at it for months and months. I was on some of those chat groups, not as a participant, but I sort of was there at the start and never left, and sort of saw how long that took for them and how much work people did to try and get redress from council. I suppose the other thing, the other observation is there is a point at which it needs to come to an end. That you need to be able to draw a line under it and move on. From the surf club, that did get to a point where we had to say, okay, we need to go back to being a surf club, doing our day job. We can't continue.
And how do you know when the time is right for that?
There's a point at which people sort of run out of gas and really need to move on, and that's And that's easily said when you're not one of the people who's lost your home. But yeah, you need to try and get back to normality as much as you can.
Is there something hopeful or meaningful you'd like to leave us with?
Well, I think despite the fact that we weren't that prepared, I think we sprung into life as a community pretty quickly, and I think we did a lot of things right, and there was a lot of mutual support. We learned a lot, and collectively put that into practice, and we were far better prepared the second time around.
Precipice was commissioned and funded by Muriwai Community Association, supported by the Auckland Council Recovery Office. Artwork by Taylor Williams, soundtrack by local Muriwai band Tin People, written in response to Cyclone Gabrielle. Ngā mihi, thank you to the Muriwai community for their input and bravery and for sharing their stories. And thank you for listening.